All right, thanks everybody for joining us today for the RevDriver's Guide to Data-Driven Demand Gen. This is going to be a panel discussion today. We have with us Susan Rylance. She's Vice President of Growth at Fahren. Susan, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Yes. Thank you for having us, Jason. But Susan Rylance, and I lead the growth over at Fahren. We're a digital leadership solutions company. And so what that means is we really help organizations as they're going through digital transformation, growth, and just providing that extra leader that will help them get to that place, whether it's digital marketing leadership, digital product leadership, customer experience, user experience, and analytics. And we do that on an interim, full-time, and consultative basis, and work with a variety of clients here in the Twin Cities.
Awesome. And then we have Brooke Braun. She's Director of Marketing at MOBE.
Hi there. Yes, this is Brooke. I'm Director of Marketing Operations at MOBE. MOBE partners with individuals to help each person realize and manage the interconnectedness of physical conditions, lifestyle decisions, emotional life. We partner with those folks and work together to make changes and choices that can improve a person's overall health and happiness. So in a role of marketing operations, we're just really guiding people through their life cycle with MOBE in order to get them to a point of independent self-management of their health.
Right. And my name, of course, is Jason Hubbard. I'm Vice President of Growth as well at SalesIntel. At SalesIntel, we pride ourselves on providing our customers with the highest quality business-to-business data. So, inevitably, as you need people to feed into your sales and marketing initiatives to be able to identify your ideal customer profiles, the accounts you want to go after, we give you the data to be able to go out and achieve and excel at those marketing initiatives, sales initiatives across your organization. All right, so like I said, it's going to be an informal panel discussion today. We have three primary questions or topics that we're going to be talking about. So we'll jump right into it. So ask the panel, what are the keys to more efficient prospecting? Of course, most people are familiar with a lot of the stats and metrics out there that as much as 2/3 of your rep's time is spent doing non-sales related activities. So those are things like, filling out information in the CRM, reporting, meetings, stuff like that. So more important than ever is, making sure that your team is as efficient as possible. So what are some of the secrets to that?
Yeah, I can jump in, and you mentioned the metrics and reporting, which are certainly key. But I think prior to all of that, the metrics and reporting, for me, the key is making sure that our sales team members really know the value proposition and ROI that they bring to the organization. So I think about it as that sales process and that methodology and that forefront, which is, that step number one is really understanding you as an organization and what the value you bring to your customers. And on top of that, looking at, do we really know our target market and our target audience? Because what I tend to see, or I have seen happen, is a lot of salespeople are striving to hit numbers. But what happens is it's not as efficient if they're not understanding who their target audience is. So it's kind of like this whole green field that's out there, and they're just casting this wide net, trying to reach as many fish in the sea as they can. So I think about it as you're really fishing with the right lure when you have your key audience identified. So think about it as, and I'm a longtime fisher person, and so think about it as you're fishing for walleye. You wouldn't use a spoon to fish for walleye. You would use a Rapala lure to fish for walleye. If I'm using a spoon, I'm going to have a heck of a time catching that walleye. And so it's really using the right tools up front and understanding the value that you bring to customers and the target audience that you're reaching. So that's kind of where I would start with, is to make your prospecting more efficient, is to really understand the ROI and value prop that you bring.
I have to admit,
Yeah,
you pushed the fishing analogy a whole lot more detailed than I've ever heard anybody do that.
It may be because I grew up with a dad who was a fisherman, and we would spend hours on rivers and lakes.
That was great. I feel much more educated about fishing now.
I know. I definitely see the connection there, and I would absolutely agree with you. I think on the marketing operations and the role that we play is to make sure that we can facilitate that process. And so often, creating programs and projects that help us identify the ideal client profile for who we're selling to and the roles and the personas that we're selling into. Identifying an ICP and identifying and creating personas, I know, is a lot of work. So for some small organizations might struggle with that, but I think any amount of work in that area is critical to being able to shorten sales cycles, find the right customers who can benefit from your service, your solution, most, to the most extreme. So I think identifying your ideal client profile. So it's beyond BANT. So, are they ready to purchase? Are they in need of purchasing? But are they in the exact right market for your solution? We've gone through projects like that, and it's like I mentioned before, it's a lot of work, but it really makes it more efficient for the selling teams, and it helps us. The data that we collect through setting these programs up is invaluable to informing how we're going to create our messaging for going forward, and making marketing spend less time and money on making sure that we're targeting the right audiences.
Great. Yeah, I would say for myself, it really kind of comes into three categories, and these are interrelated. One is the process that drives it. So making sure that you have a well-defined process you've gone through and you've optimized, what that is, mapped it out so everybody's on the same page. You found ways to make that more efficient. The second has to do with technology and the tech stack employed. Technology properly configured and deployed can be a game changer, can be a huge force multiplier and make those processes much more efficient. But the flip side of it, you're seeing increasingly organizations that have tech bloat, where they've got so many different platforms, so many different tools that people are supposed to be used, and they've oftentimes never been properly configured, integrated, optimized, certainly are often not properly put into the context of the overall sales process. So, it's the technology that's not fully mapped or plugged into that process. And so they don't work hand in hand. And then one of the biggest problems is when you wind up with platform and data silos. So, it exacerbates and compounds the problem that, has plagued, things like CRM from the start, which is how do you get people to use the thing and how do you keep the records updated? Obviously, if you're going to multiple places to try and log that information or try and pull that data that you need or run your reports, it exacerbates all of those problems. And so that would be the second. And then, a third that plugs into both of those is the data component. If you're, even if you're using the right tech stack, but the data and information you have in it is not accurate or is incomplete or is missing, then you're not getting the full value out of it, and it you can build either a virtuous or a vicious cycle when it comes to that. If you've got the right data and it's making their job more efficient, easier to do, then they're incentivized and encouraged to continue to keep that updated and go into those platforms because it makes their job easier and it makes them more effective at what they're doing. But the reverse is of course true as well. Like you get them to actually go in there, but the information they need is not there, or it's not accurate, or it's incomplete, and then they're discouraged from ever doing that again. And obviously, you've got all of the stats that are out there as far as, how much time is wasted and how much bad data affects your team because they have to go out and verify the information, or they have to go track down phone numbers or email addresses or confirm that they're still at that company or in that role. And then, the additional side to it is, even if you have all of the the data that you have in there is right or accurate, if you're missing key essential pieces, like increasingly direct dial phone numbers is becoming crucial. It's really, really hard to get through, gatekeepers and get to the right people without those direct dial phone numbers. And you see your effectiveness of your sales team, especially if you have an outbound team that's primarily responsible for your dialing, to have access to those direct dial phone numbers, because it's increasingly becoming difficult to get through and get in front of the people that you want to.
Yep. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Jason. And, as, prior to this, and we have some of the questions in front of us, that is what you just discussed was certainly a key aspect that I was looking at, is the technology and how it works well together, but having that process up front. One of the things that I've seen over my my career is tools kind of sometimes take the forefront when processes aren't built. And so companies decide to bring a tool in and think it's going to fix everything, when really they just didn't have the processes set up. Because, you look at some CRM tools that are amazing tools, and many of them are amazing, but in reality, you only use 10% of the tool, and then you get frustrated with it. And part of it is because you don't have that process and content built up front. To your point is, do we have everything we need for the sales team, content to allow them to do their job more efficiently and effectively? And a tool alone won't do that. And, speaking to just having the right information for the inside sales reps, completely agree that that's one of the most efficient ways to help your inside sales reps. And being a startup organization, we are inside sales reps, we're outside sales reps, we're the ones delivering work, and it takes a lot of time when you don't have that direct contact and direct data easily accessible.
Yeah, and I'm curious to hear from you guys. How do you break down, or where do you fall on the spectrum of when it comes to prospecting, identifying or feeding your reps the accounts or the ICP that you want to go after, versus giving them the freedom to go out and kind of do their own research and prospecting? Where do you guys kind of fall on that continuum?
Well, I'll start. We really look at just providing them the targeted audience in terms of what's the industry we're going after, what's the size of organization, the type of leaders we're going after, and then to Brooke's point, really looking at the ideal customer profile, giving those guidelines, and then allowing them to identify a targeted account list in finding out who should they target, because sometimes it's based on personal preference within how they might work within this specific industry. So I prefer to give them guidance, but allow them to identify the targeted audience or target
absolutely.
market.
Right. And we do a lot of market research to find the right fit using demographic data, revenue data, identifying, are people even in the market, things like that, listening to intent. Are people at our target account shopping, are they Googling for solutions that we're selling or for related, keywords? So that being said, that helps us identify, a handful of accounts, not a handful, but a good portion of accounts. But our sales team always, they always know the market a little bit better because they're in it. So we always accept accounts that our sales team find. For example, if you find one account that is terrifically suitable for us, a great fit. Are there like accounts like that? Are there similar accounts that the team can identify and use kind of their experience with selling to the first account into the similar accounts? So that also helps us expand our ICP and provide more intelligence to the team and grow our number of accounts that we're targeting.
Cool. Yeah, I asked that partially out of my own interest because we're, as most people, we're still experimenting with those and trying to figure out where we fall internally along that continuum. We've kind of tried all of it. We're definitely in a sort of mixed strategy right now. So we have, some of our reps are targeting, named accounts that we've pulled out and identified specifically, and we have some working out of a larger pool of people that we've sort of just run filters off of as far as, defining what our ICP looks like. So yeah, we're still trying to nail that down and optimize that, and probably always will be. But yeah, in the interest of time, let's hop into our next one. So we talked a little bit about tools in the previous discussion, but what are some of the most essential tools for you guys when it comes to processing, tracking, and reporting?
Yeah, I mean, between sales and marketing, there's a plethora out there. In my mind, there's probably 4 main tools that will help in the process tracking and reporting. And one which we talked about a little bit up front, or the mechanism, is the lead generation platform. So this really just gives you access to potential buyers in your targeted audience. And it's just, again, you had mentioned it, Jason, it's just a more efficient tool that aids in identifying new contacts within your market. So lead generation platform, a CRM, customer relationship management tool, so utilize for that tracking and reporting those prospecting and client initiatives. And then depending on the industry you're in, but a customer service management software. So once they are a client, how do you manage that full life cycle of your customer experience? And that's key. And then in the midst of that, a marketing automation tool to help track some of that upfront, whether it's a sales qualified lead or a marketing qualified lead. So the 3 or 4 of those I feel are essential in that whole process. And I believe you had mentioned it as well, Jason, is all the tools making sure how do they talk to each other so they're not standalone. Are they bi-directional in terms of sharing information between the different platforms? So those are the ones that I feel are efficient or essential in running efficient sales and marketing practice.
Cool. What about you, Brooke?
Yeah, I think those are absolutely the key tools. And then, as you mentioned earlier, Jason, if you feel a gap in your stack, finding a solution or another tool that isn't too robust and doesn't go to waste and just fits right in that little gap that you need is tough. And aggregating data from all of these sources in order to report is also a challenge. As Susan said, making sure that they can talk to one another. And if they can't, another tool, which isn't, a software, is we have to have proper personnel, people who care about ROI, conversions, and efficiency. A lot of time that is, like you said earlier, Jason, a lot of time is spent on data integrity and making sure that people have, for example, the right phone number to call. So making sure that there are people in place who care about these things. And there's ancillary solutions that it kind of can help us go above and beyond the 3 or 4 that Susan mentioned. Things that measure intent. So if you can cookie people and understand what people are looking for on your website, or partner with an intent, or partner with a company who can help you understand where a person is in their buying process or propensity to buy. all of those things are kind of icing on the cake. But again, making sure that you are able to make all of those different sources talk to one another. And Jason, as you mentioned earlier, you said your team is still sorting. You've got two buckets of sales, some that are focusing on named accounts and some that are sort of trying to identify accounts as well. I think the intent like tools and the demographic finding tools and the psychographic tools help to bring some of those accounts to the surface that maybe your sales team is finding on their own.
Great, and I love that you mentioned the manpower piece of it, or the human aspect of the data side of it. Briefly climb up on my soapbox here, but yeah, I think that's one that oftentimes gets ignored or doesn't get enough attention, because there's a tendency to focus on, the quality of what you're putting into the system, or, things that you can try and do to better qualify stuff before it goes in, or, what are some of the tools we can use to handle problems with like duplicates or incomplete data and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, those tools and processes and stuff like that are only going to get you so far. And crucial to, it is having a culture that's really seeing the benefit and the value of having accurate, up-to-date data, so that they go in and identify whenever they see something that's not right or needs to be updated or needs to be fixed, whatever. That they flag that, they raise their hand, they dig into it and actually update it themselves, because it takes that hands-on approach at an individual level to really get in and maintain the data quality and keep it to a point that you really need it. And ultimately, that really comes down to culture. And people tend to kind of go one extreme or the other with it. You can either have a data-centric culture where they really see the value in it and everybody takes ownership in it, or everybody sees it as our data is just a cluster, and it's, we're never going to get there, so we're just going to deal with it as is. And it really kind of tends to go one way or the other. And then crucial to that is, if you get behind the 8 ball on it and you've got a huge amount to clean up, it becomes just an ever-growing and increasing challenge and task, versus if you just stay on top of it. And then the other piece of it, both of you mentioned CRM. Interestingly, I've seen over the years, CRM, sort of started off as its own kind of primary platform. But as we've seen the proliferation of all these different, kind of specialized tools and stuff like that, it's been interesting to watch CRM sort of become the hub for all of that. And so instead of having to make sure that each one of the platforms can integrate with each other, as long as they can all integrate with the CRM, then that sort of becomes the hub for it. And as long as the data can flow in and out of the CRM, then it makes it pretty easy to integrate across those different platforms, because you've got a central repository for all of that data. And so it's been interesting watching over the last 10 or 15 years sort of the movement of CRM and its role within an organization in the sales process.
Jason, I have to say that I love that is your soapbox topic. We could chat for a while. we could chat for a little bit. And amongst my peers, a common issue is, at the end of the day, or at the end of a program, or at the end of a quarter or year doing QBRs, it's how did we perform? What are these data points? Everyone has ideas on what they're looking for from the data in order to improve future performance, but taking the time to ensure that everything is set up properly and tracking properly in advance is critical. You can't go back and reinvent things. It has to be, KPIs have to be determined in advance. Tracking needs to be taken into consideration. So it does require a culture of people who are aware of the effort that it takes to make sure that data is clean, data is talking to other data sources, and what it takes to generate the reporting.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's hard. and it takes time and manpower and bandwidth. And so if there's not a priority across the organization for it, then it ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
I agree.
Cool.
Now we're soapboxing again.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so the last one, and this flows really well into what we've kind of been talking about as far as identifying your ICP, figuring out who you're reaching out to, but then, crucial to that is you actually have to, once you've done all of that, you've got to actually reach out to the people. And so, the two key prongs to that are, how do you come up with the right content to get in front of the right people once you've identified them, and what channels do you use to try and do that?
Yeah, you're right. It kind of goes to the ICP, but I've had experience where I've led a couple of different companies through a workshop where we worked with sales and marketing teams and had them bring in their top customers, their top 5 customers, and then their bottom 5. And we went through a workshop to identify what does that ideal customer look like, so that we can identify, are they the right audience that we need to go after, and then create the right messaging. And from that, we then created 4 to 6 different value proposition statements that the teams could use for the different messaging channels. And so, for example, we looked at what is unique to us in our organization, looked at the competition, and then created those value proposition statements. And then taking that to email, to phone, to web and email. And honestly, I think it's an iteration process because each of those messaging points need to be a little bit different depending on the channel. Phone, you have to catch somebody if you're leaving a message within the first 5 seconds. So how can you make sure that you state that value proposition quickly up front? Email, you can catch somebody fairly quickly as well in the subject line. But now that you have mobile first, it's not only the subject line, but what's that first line of text in the email, because I want to read that first line of text to decide if I'm going to read further. And then, of course, web and social. So creating those that content, whether it's case studies and whatnot, that is going to grab people's attention. So it really kind of starts back to that workshop and identifying your value proposition and then creating your value statements to help message with the different channels.
Yeah, and I love how you pointed to, going and looking at your own data for that, because you can sit and do, strategy sessions and stuff like that as far as what you think, but oftentimes what you think isn't supported by the data until you go back and look at it. Yep. And even if you look at the data, you can come up with hypotheses, but they're just that. Mm-hmm. Until you go out and actually run with it and put it to the test, you don't know whether you actually came up with the right hypothesis for it.
Right. Well, it was amazing. After the workshop, we pulled all of the deals that we currently had in the pipeline and realized the ones that were, and you hate to say this, that they were 100 days or older in the pipeline, they weren't our ideal customers. So once we went through this workshop, we really identified, well, they're not our ideal customers. So we're chasing something that doesn't make sense for us. So you're right, the data was key for us in identifying that.
Yep, and when we talk about different strategies to identify what is working best and how to plan for messaging and what channels is most appropriate, I would definitely agree with building your ICP, but also, an essential in that is interviewing, perhaps your clients, your lookalike clients, and also analyzing your win and loss data to see what the consistencies are. And then on a more tactical level, you mentioned, specifically channels like email. In a B2B world versus a B2C world, testing to see if personal email addresses are, there's some common understandings that maybe sending emails on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 10 and 1 is most efficient. But testing to make sure that if you do have access to a personal email address, even in the B2B world, can you send an email over the weekend when more people might be just have more time to browse on their phone? And then, you know, also looking, if you've got a marketing automation tool that can tell you this information, are people reading on their phone? Are they reading on their desktop? Just to make sure that you're really listening and reacting to the data.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you know, it's part of the fun of what we do, but it's always a moving target. You know, even when you find something that seems to be you know, a definitive trend or strategy or whatever, no sooner do you find it, but it starts shifting on you. So you have to stay on top of it and make sure that you know, that hasn't moved. You know, you may find that Saturday mornings are great, but part of the tendency is, if you found that, somebody else probably found that out as well. And then, you know, next thing you know, everybody started moving and shifting their focus around, you know, that data point, that strategy, which then, of course, you know, the people at the end of it receiving it adapt and adjust their behavior. So it never changes, or it never ends, as far as, you know, sort of the battle of trying to figure out where the opportunities are to break through and how to do that. Are there certain channels that you found that are more effective today versus others?
I don't know if I found one channel more efficient rather than all of them together. You know, utilizing all channels, because you're trying to target an audience, and they want to hear your voice. They want to see you as a person and then hear from you. So I think a culmination of all of them in today's you know, market, where we've got so much content coming at us, but if we see it and hear it and feel it in different fashions, I think that's more of what's going to work versus just one specific channel. That's my opinion.
No, I think that's great, because it was sort of a trick question. We didn't even go over this ahead of time. But yeah, I mean, I just did a webinar last week with Ben Grasso, where we talked pretty extensively about this, and I think that is a false question for people. I mean, the answer inevitably is all of the above. And yeah, we had a great stat that we shared in that, where if you go from one channel to 3, you'll typically see a 4 times lift in engagement. And you know, you may see people particularly engage with email or on LinkedIn or whatever, but the fact is, if you're doing that across multiple channels, whatever channel they're engaging with you in is going to have a significant lift, because you know, those additional touch points, those additional channels, those additional ways, you know, as you were talking about, you know, tailoring the message, tailoring the presentation based on the channel. You know, you break through in different ways and get their attention in different ways across those. So yeah, I agree. I think it's essential to do it across multiple channels.
Yeah, I agree. And over the years, you know, I've heard, oh, email is dead. You know, you've got to switch to something that's a little bit more responsive. Direct mail is dead. But the fact is, you know, when we've tested, and even if people aren't, if we're not able to track that they've engaged, so they're not clicking through, or, you know, not scanning a QR code on a direct mail, it's when we pull that, when we discontinue those forms of outreach, our engagement, how we measure engagement goes down. So we have to be top of mind, even if we don't think that we are reaching people. We are. Our data has shown that. So we definitely do try to do like a cross-channel, just nurture, because as soon as we stop, we see participation with our target audience decline.
Yeah, it's that old Achilles heel of marketing. You want to do attribution, but just because you can't do attribution doesn't mean that it's not effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember having that battle a few years ago at one of my previous companies about our our budget for retargeting. And it was like, well, we're not seeing a lot of people click on this, and so we can't attribute actual accounts or anything to it. I was like, well, let's run an experiment. Let's turn it off for a week. We turned it off for, we thought we were going to turn it off for a week. We made it 2 days in. It was like, turn that back on. Turn it on right now. So
good testing strategies.
Well, cool. We're a few minutes over, so we can open it up here and see whether anybody has any questions for us. And then let's see. Don't know whether we're going to have time for any, but thank you guys so much for joining us today. It was a great discussion. We'll send an email out to everybody with a link to the recording and the deck. You can reply directly to that email if you have any additional questions for any of us. And thanks, guys. It's been fantastic.